Hello everyone, I'm going to share with you how I make my oxtails and gravy. Are you ready? Let's get started. So these are the ingredients that we're going to be using. I have some Lawry seasoning salt, some black pepper, some vinegar. I have about 4.5, almost 5 pounds of oxtails. Those are beef oxtails. I also have half of a yellow onion and 2 celery ribs. So what I like to do first is I like to prepare my celery and onions before I start working with my meat. Now I'm using a half of a yellow onion, but you can also use a white onion as well. And this is going to give me about 1 cup of chopped yellow onion. Now, when it comes to the size that I like to chop my onion, I like to chop my onion about the size of, say, a nickel or say like a dime, about this size here. Not too much bigger than that because I'm going to be using the wonderful juice that's going to be coming off that broth, that's going to be coming off of our oxtails. I'm going to be using that to make our gravy. And likewise with my celery, I'm going to chop that about the same size. Now, my parents grew up in the South in Alabama, and in our home, having oxtails, especially during the holiday season, Thanksgiving, Christmas, we not only had turkey and ham, but my mom always would make a nice big pot of oxtails. And so when it comes to the oxtails, I'm going to share with y'all how I like to clean my oxtails. I saw my mom clean oxtails many different times, and we used to get them from the neighborhood butcher, and she'd go and pick out the pieces that she wanted, and he'd wrap those in that pink butcher paper. But nowadays, I just get them from, I just go into the grocery store and just get them like this. And so they're going to come packaged most of the time if you're not getting them from the butcher. And so what I do is I take a nice big bowl, and I'm using cold water. And so what you want to do is sometimes you'll have, maybe there'll be like a little film on the oxtails. And so you want to make sure that you rinse them several times in cold water. And so this is how my mom would do it. We get a big bowl like this. You want to make sure that your bowl is going to be enough to fit your oxtails nice and comfortably. So you fill up your bowl, you move your oxtails around, just kind of like gyrate them around. And you want to do that a couple of times. And then next what we would do, fill up your bowl one more time with some cold water. And then we're going to be using some distilled white vinegar. And we're going to be using, this is a small bottle that I have of the distilled white vinegar. And so we're going to use 2 capfuls of the distilled white vinegar. Now the 2 capfuls, it's about a teaspoon each. So roughly you're going to be using 2 teaspoons that you're going to add to your bowl of water with your oxtails. And then once I add that distilled white vinegar, you see how I'm just like rubbing the oxtails, and if you have any like loose pieces that are on the oxtail, I just like to pull those off and discard those. That's optional, you don't have to, but I just like to discard sometimes those loose pieces that are hanging off. And so I just kind of rub just like that. And this is something that I saw my mom do all the time, where she would just really rub them and make sure that any residue, any like slickness, I guess you could call it, that was on the oxtails, that she would clean that off really good. And now we're going to do our last and final rinse. And what we do is we fill our bowl up for the final time with our cold water. We're going to add 2 more capfuls of that white distilled vinegar. And this time what we're going to do is we're going to let our oxtails sit in the cold water for about 10 to 15 minutes, just like that. And as you notice, when we first started cleaning our oxtails, how our water was cloudy and it was filmy. Your water in your bowl should be relatively clear. So we're going to go on and let this sit for about 10 or 15 minutes. Now it's time for us to go on and pour the water off, and we're going to season up our oxtails. Now I like to use my Dutch oven or a nice heavy bottom pot. If you don't have a heavy bottom pot, you can just use a regular pot. That'll work as well. And so then I'm going to use my Lawry seasoning. Now I don't measure the seasoning. I just kind of do what I saw my mom do over the years. And what she always did was she took her seasoning and she did a nice sheen all over both sides of her oxtails. So I just kind of go through the pieces while it's in the pot, and I just do it one at a time, and I just do a nice sheen of the seasoning salt all over. Now in the description box below, I will have a list of all the ingredients you need to make these delicious tender oxtails, as well as making the wonderful gravy that we make with the oxtail broth. Also in the description box below, I will have some suggested seasoning measurements to help you season up your oxtails. Now next what we do is I go on and I put in my celery and my onion. Now we're going to go on and put our pot on the stove and we're going to fill it with some water. We fill our pot with enough water just to cover the oxtails. Okay, so it's not necessarily like 4 cups or 8 cups. You're going to fill it just to cover the oxtails, no matter what pot that you happen to be using to cook your oxtails. Now, once we have our water filled, just to, basically cover them, not too high, then I put my top on my pot and I kind of put it just a little bit askew so that way some steam can escape. And so I turn my fire on high and I let my fire stay on high until my oxtails come to a nice rolling boil. And see how it's a nice rolling boil? Now what I do next is, this is something that my mom always did, was we skim off anything that's on the top. Sometimes you get that like haze, like a gray haze that's on the top of your pot, especially when you're cooking like meats and whatnot. And so what we do is you want to just take a nice big spoon and I just kind of move my oxtails around a bit. But any of that little foam, I just like to go on and skim that off. And that's something that my mom taught me and showed me how to do, just to, skim off that gray foam that can be on the top when you're cooking meats or making stews. Now, once we've done that and we've kind of mixed our oxtail around, I kind of see how they're coming along with their tenderness. Now, oxtails need to cook for a good while so that way they become nice and tender. I also turn my fire down to a medium low and we're going to let them simmer. Now your oxtails can take an hour and a half, they may take 2 hours, they may take 2.5 hours, but that time spent is so worth it because the oxtails will come out nice and tender if you give them a time to just simmer nice and slowly in your pot. And I like to check on them a few times just to see how they're doing with their doneness and with their tenderness. Also, something that you want to look for is when your oxtail, when the meat starts to pull away from the bone, that's also an indication that they're just about done and they're starting to get nice and tender. Now our oxtails are looking great. I'm going to let them simmer for about 15 to 20 minutes more. While they are doing that, I'm going to go on and make our gravy. Also, that last 15 or 20 minutes, you can also taste your oxtail to see if you want to add any additional seasoning to your pot. So in my skillet that I have here, I put in some butter and I'm using 1/4 of a cup of butter. And I'm also using 1/4 of a cup of flour. So you want to use equal parts flour and equal parts butter. So 1/4 of a cup is 4 tablespoons. So I put in 4 tablespoons of butter. I'm using unsalted butter, but you can use salted or unsalted butter. Whatever one you have on hand will work fine. And then that 1/4 a cup of the flour. Now, once the butter was melted, I went on and I added in the flour. You want to mix it around because we're making a nice roux here. And you want to have the color, it's going to be a nice, deep peanut butter color. And I like to use my wooden spoon and make it nice and smooth and move it all around. Now, once your gravy, your roux, is looking this color, you want to switch from your spoon to your whisk. I'm using here my metal whisk. And I'm whisking in 2 cups of the broth that came off of our oxtails. Now in that broth, remember, we have our celery, we have our onion, and so that's why it's also important that you do, if you're going to be making gravy with your broth from your oxtail, you do want to cut those pieces of celery and the pieces of onion relatively on the small side, so that way they can go on and be incorporated nicely when you're making your gravy. And so the secret to making really good gravy and making it nice and smooth is that when you are putting in your broth, whether you're using a chicken broth and any kind of gravy that you want to be making, you want to use your wire whisk and you want to constantly whisk as you're adding in your liquid to your roux that you make. You don't want to stop, because once you stop whisking, you're going to end up with big clumps of the roux and the flour. And so you want to make sure that you're constantly whisking as you're adding in your liquid. Now, once I've whisked it really well, I switch back over to my spoon, and then you see how it's looking. Our gravy is looking so good, y'all. And so just, you have those little chunks of the celery in there and the little chunks of the onion as well. And so I just go on and use my spoon now, and I'm just making sure things are nice and incorporated. And now what you want to do is, I like to go on and taste my gravy for seasoning to see if we need to go on and add any additional seasoning to our gravy. I'm going to add a little bit more of the black pepper. This is coarse ground black pepper. It's the same pepper that I also used when I made the oxtails. So I'm just going to add a little bit more of that to the gravy. Now our oxtails are done. I'm going to check on our oxtails, and then I'm going to serve us up some oxtails with our gravy. I've made some rice to go with our meal tonight. And growing up, my mom would always make some cornbread and some greens to go with the oxtails. And in the description box below, I'll have a link to my video on my mom's cornbread. So I've added our oxtails and the gravy to our plate. It is looking so good, y'all. I cannot wait to dig in. I'm going to go on and give y'all the first bite, and let's see how we did today. Let me get some of the nice oxtail and some of that gravy and rice on our fork. And hey, if you guys are enjoying this video, don't forget to show it some love and give it a thumbs up. That bite right there is for you. Now let me take my bite. We did good, y'all. Mama would be proud of us. Well, I hope you enjoyed spending time with me today in my kitchen. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, I invite you to hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, don't forget to show it some love. Give it a thumbs up. Click share. Share this video with a friend or family. And remember, it's always good when Devon is cooking for the family. I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye, everybody.